Hi class, we're on week 6. We're looking at chapter 5 and chapter 6 and just talking about planning for starting a group. This seems kind of backwards because of all the information we've already previously discussed, but in my opinion. But I do really appreciate like this information because it is a lot of preparation and just things to be mindful of if you are starting a group or leading a group. Again, a lot of times you guys will come into counseling centers or work at rehabilitation centers or groups that are already established. And so with that being said, there's like maybe you don't get to pick the group's already going, you're just joining as the leader. Now, sometimes you will start a group from the beginning. With that being said, you should already know the material or come up with the material, but in that, know like how long the group needs to be. Know what the points of the group are, the objectives, the rationales. Is it a group that ends up ending? Is it a group that ends up staying on forever? Is it a closed group, an open group? Before you try to get members to come, like you need to know all those facts first. That's really important because otherwise it could seem kind of backwards. Like if you don't know those things and then you're screening people, then you're not going to be getting the right people. So you need to be able to ask questions. So like that especially if it's a particular kind of group, not everybody's a good fit. And maybe not everybody's at the right place emotionally for a group. And that's why screening is so important. Because someone could think they're ready or someone recommended it to them and they're not at that place. Now, an AA group or an NA group, that's different. Anyone could show up at any time. And whether they're ready or not, whether they have an addiction or not. However, with other kinds of groups, that's not the same. Grief groups can look like more interview based to see if someone's ready. Maybe even like a parenting group. There's certain questions that are asked before you join the group. Sometimes sexual addiction groups, like not anyone can just join. And so there's a specific kind of process to join the group. So things to take into consideration, obviously, is how many members, what's the length of time, is it open or closed, how long and how frequent are we meeting, and like where is the group and is where the location suitable for the group and the kind of group, because again, privacy is important. For an open group like an AA group, let's just say, it could be huge. You know, some groups meet in churches or things of that nature where you're in a sanctuary. A lot of now I'm gonna go blank. There's a faith-based group. Oh, now that's gonna bother me. It's called Celebrate Recovery. Yes. Celebrate Recovery starts off like with a lot of people usually, and then they break off into smaller groups. So they have kind of like, I think, an opening meeting together and maybe a closing meeting together. So that might be everyone together, and then they break off, I think, into gender specific and then area specific groups. And so that kind of location, you need a specific, or that kind of styling of running a group, you need a specific kind of location where a lot of people can come together. I've been to AA groups where there's over 30 people in the group, so you can't be in some itty bitty tiny room. Okay. There's a lot of great advantages to group. I can't speak highly enough for group. I think clients can learn a lot from other people who are walking in their same shoes. I think it's cathartic. It's helpful. I've taught group class before over on main campus, and I had a student who worked with the AIDS population. And some of the things she was talking about, her groups just seemed phenomenal. Just the amount of support, knowing someone else was going through things that you were, someone that understood what you were going through, just made it very helpful and cathartic. And so I just think there's something that you can learn from a group that you can't just learn from individual counseling, assuming the groups run well and is done appropriately. Now, people may think, oh, anyone can do group. Not everyone can do group. There's certain conditions that probably wouldn't be a good fit. Sometimes people aren't ready for group. They can be very intimidated. They're just not emotionally in a good spot. And so being in group wouldn't be a good solution. You know, maybe they need a little bit more time for their own personal psychotherapy before they just join a group. You know, it's not all about becoming BFFs with all your group members, okay? It's about learning, growing, getting through a season, getting through a time, but it's not to become best friends. And so if someone has that expectation, then they're going to be disappointed with group. Group isn't about someone telling you this is the way you're supposed to be. Therapy in general is not about that. We may know as clinicians, like, oh, you'd be really better off if you stopped this or that, but that's not our job. We want change to happen organically. We want change to happen because the person wants to change, not just because I said it's a good idea. Okay? And so a lot of times people can go on misconceptions. Even as group leaders, we could have misconceptions on what's a good idea and what's not a good idea, and then we could have things blow up, right? So you want to make sure that you're prepared. It's important to be prepared when leading a group, kind of have an idea what's happening, especially if there's some structure to it, like the session before flows into the next session. You want to make sure that you're prepared for that, you're ready for it. Now, group can go a lot of different ways because you're dealing with human beings, but you still want to make sure that you're prepared, that you're ready to go, and that, again, that you are on your toes so that you can be ready to kind of go with whatever happens in group. So that's important. Again, goals. So you as a clinician need to know goals before before the group even starts. Like, what would be the ideal goals? And then you have your group and see what they think of what the group's goals should be, right? So create an alliance with group members by providing a conceptual framework. Describe how group work helps, in order to have them be bought in, why this is maybe different than individual psychotherapy. And this is what you should get out of this group. This is what we hope for you to get out of this group. And so that could be a way for measuring, like, well, if you're not getting out of the group, then what's going on here that's causing you not to be able to? That's something for people to compare to. Again, likely to have frustrations and disappointments. There's going to be times where things are going really well and they really like what they're learning. Maybe times they don't feel like they're learning enough, or other people aren't changing. Being part of the group and really showing up is important. You can't get the most out of group if you don't come. Same with individual counseling. You're not going to get anything out of it if you don't show up, or if you're not honest. A lot of times people show up, but they're not being honest with themselves, and that doesn't help, And then again, confidentiality to build trust and cohesiveness in the group. Okay. Having evaluations can be helpful as a way to kind of engage where things are going, how it's going, what they learned. Feedback is never, it sometimes isn't easy. It's intimidating because we want everybody to like what we're doing and feel positive about it. But sometimes that's the best way to gauge if what we're doing is effective, and maybe what would be things we could do better. And maybe you might get a lot of great positive feedback in areas where you thought, oh man, I was really terrible. But I think doing something of that nature is really helpful. And you could do it where they don't put their names on it, so they don't feel like they're going to hurt your feelings, but where you get a lot of honesty. Okay. Group co-leaders. I think co-leaders are great. You just want to get the right co-leader. Remember, it's not a competition. You guys are meant to work together. You want to make sure that you're prepared and meet early and ahead of time to make sure you're ready for the group and how it's supposed to go. Making sure you have the same teaching and philosophy styles. You could be obviously different people, but you want to make sure you're on the same page with what you're doing. That's really important because, group members can be potentially manipulative, and that's where we can have division in group, which isn't helpful. Okay, so initial stage, that's the very beginning, right? Your participants, they may test the atmosphere of the group, take, ways to push each other's buttons. They might get to know each other. Members are deciding how much they will disclose, seeing if the group feels safe. There might be some awkward silence and awkwardness, and you'll probably find the group members who can handle the silence and group members who are like, I feel so uncomfortable with the silence. The whole mistrust situation. You might have a lot of that at the beginning. A lot of times people have fear about being judged, fear of not sounding intelligent, not knowing what to expect, not knowing how to communicate thoughts and feelings, don't want to be rejected. Those are some feelings that come up at the beginning. And again, a lot of times, even though someone could be a grown adult, they literally do not know how to articulate their feelings. And so when you talk about being in a group with a bunch of different people who are talking about their feelings, it can be very overwhelming and feel pressure to be where other people are at when that's not at all the expectation. So again, trying to really focus on, that's how you're feeling. How is this affecting you in the here and now? And then that might be helpful for them as how it affects them when they're not there, but trying to keep them very much present and focused. We talked about this from Yalom's text. It's a way to deal with everyday life concerns and frustrations. Again, it gets you out of the past. And a lot of times, a lot of our irrational thinking comes from like either the past or the future, but being in the here and now is all about being in the present, and that's helping you be mindful and grounded. And a lot of times clients and people in general are not grounded. They're just very caught up in their headspace. So we want to create an atmosphere where people can trust one another. So we want to make sure we're showing positive regard, genuine listening, empathy, self-disclosure if necessary, right, in an appropriate way, respect, understanding like verbal and nonverbal cues, right? And so we as leaders can demonstrate that. Now, not every group member is going to be super inept. You might have some group members who like do not have good social skills. And so just making sure like we're demonstrating those things, and hopefully we can be modeling and then correcting things that need to be corrected if people get inappropriate or maybe say something in a way that they shouldn't. But these kinds of attitudes and behaviors help to establish some level of trust and allow a level of vulnerability in group. So again, establishing goals. The main task is helping members formulate clear and specific goals that we can see measurable. So why it's important to have measurable goals, it's to be able to measure progress. Like, if I'm trying to achieve something like weight loss, let's just say, if I'm doing all this work but don't see the numbers on maybe the scale go down, I'm not going to feel like I'm doing the job. Now, maybe with some questions, maybe I might not see numbers going down on the scale, but maybe I feel better. Maybe I really enjoy working out, and so I emotionally feel better. I don't feel maybe like I've had weight loss, but I emotionally feel better. Maybe I find out, I haven't lost weight, but I've lost inches, but it's trying to see like if I just focus on one part of it, of the evaluation, if I just had one question, I may not be able to really gauge progress. I think having multiple questions to gauge how it's measurable can help a person really determine if they're moving forward. If you don't have goals, then, what's the purpose and the point? And I think we as humans all need a purpose and a point. And again, identifying goals is maybe a group process. Now, you might have some real generic goals as a leader going into the group, but then the group as a whole may determine them more specifically. Okay? Group norms. So it's again, examples of group norms are expectations or promptness in regular attendance. That's a fair norm, right? If you are there, you're going to get something out of it. Sharing in a way that's personable. Getting feedback from people in the group. So not that you just talk and everybody stares at you and doesn't like help you or give you insight. We don't want just encouragement. We also want challenges, because being challenged is how we grow. And then trying to stay in the present. I wanted to touch on guidelines to benefit from a group. Experiment with new behavior in group. Be aware of misusing jargon. Expect some disruption of your life. Expect to discover unfamiliar aspects of yourself. So you might, especially if people point out things like you're not aware of that, because we don't always see ourselves the way everybody else sees us, and someone may point something out to us and we're like, oh, like I wouldn't even guess that, because we just don't see it, and it's not because we're necessarily so not present. It's just, it's very easy to not see things the way maybe others see them. Homework assignments, journaling, that's may help a person to gain as much as they can out of a group. And trying not to listen with a judgmental spirit, but being open-minded and not being discriminatory, obviously. And then, of course, leaders in the beginning stage, we want to determine responsibility, structure, who's opening, who's closing, making sure like if you're taking turns alternating weeks, like do we know who's doing what week? Do we know who's doing what information? If we're working together, how we're sharing things, because that in itself could be a bit of a problem. Or maybe you're just the leader that's there to observe, and so, okay, if that's my role, is it clear that that's what my role is? Do the group members know that that's what my role is? And again, a lot of it's just testing the waters at the beginning, right? This is new. This is different and maybe unfamiliar, kind of scary territory, and we want to try to make it as warm and welcoming as group leaders, so that this initial stage, like everyone will warm up to one another and start to feel comfortable, so that we can so we can move forward into the next stages of group, and there'll be a level of vulnerability and trust. And I think we as leaders can establish that quite early on. All right, guys, so week 6, we have 2 more weeks to go. Week 8, I will not post the lecture for those of you actually watching my lectures. Week 7 is next week, and so you will have your discussion boards. I hope you're working well with your capstone projects, and I've really enjoyed watching your videos. Keep up your hard work. I know this is a lot going on right now. Our world is a very scary place right now, and so just keep up your hard work. Stay safe out there and healthy, and I will see you again next week.